Welcome. This is the Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing podcast. This is where you'll learn strategies to help you achieve lifetime financial freedom through real estate investment. Your host, Rod Khleif, has owned over 2,000 homes and apartments, and he brings experts in all aspects of real estate investment and management onto the show. Now, here's your host, Rod Khleif.
Welcome to Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing. I'm Rod Khleif, and I'm thrilled you're here. Before we get to our guest, I want to mention a couple of quick things. First being, of course, if you like what you hear on this show, please subscribe to us on iTunes so you never miss another episode. I also want to let you know that you can set up free 30-minute phone calls with me to literally discuss anything you like. If you have a deal you want to discuss on any topic in business or real estate, I love talking to you guys and will help you in any way that I can. And I don't ever sell anything on this podcast, so there's no agenda on these phone calls. You know, we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. Now, I only have time for 2 or 3 of these calls a week, but you can schedule them directly on my calendar, which is on lifetimecashflowpodcast.com. All right, let's get this party started. I know you're going to get incredible value from the man we're talking to today. His name is Goossens, and he's a successful real estate investor from Australia. He has a podcast for Australian investors that want to invest in the U.S. It's called An Aussie's Guide to U.S. Real Estate, or Investing in the U.S., An Aussie's Guide to U.S. Real Estate, rather. And I know he cut his teeth with duplexes up in the New York area. Last year, he took down 250 units, and he's under contract for another 320 units this year. So excited to ask him some questions about syndication. Reed, I'm thrilled you're here, buddy.
G'day, Rod. Pleasure to. Thanks for having me, I should say.
Absolutely. Aussie, Aussie, Aussie.
Exactly.
For those of you guys that don't know that, that's like a thing Australians do. And you're supposed to say oi, 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 I think.
Exactly.
But, yeah, I was actually in the Gold Coast for a Tony Robbins event, you know, a lifetime ago, and climbed that bridge in Sydney, and really, really loved Australia.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so expand on the intro a little bit. You know, hopefully I didn't take any of your oomph on your introduction here.
Not at all. Okay. Not at all, Rod. And again, thanks for having me on the show.
Sure.
My background's, as you know, I'm clearly Australian, and I moved to the United States in 2012, and my background is, I studied in structural engineering, and when I moved here, I was a structural engineer, and I developed a passion for real estate because I was, you know, my why factor is that I was sick of my day job and I wanted to do more with my life. And when I moved here, the barriers to entry are a lot lower in the United States compared to back home in Australia, and I saw just, you know, the value of buying, you know, $50,000 and you can buy a duplex that, you know, creates $1,300 a month, and I was like, wow, that's incredible. You would never find that in Australia. And, you know, that low barrier meant that I could buy a couple of them straight off the bat. Now, granted, I didn't have any credit or credit scores with the banks because I was brand new. So I had to sort of buy everything all cash. And I, as I said, I cut my teeth on some duplexes up in upstate New York. Got to a point where I was, you know, ran out of my own money after about a year and a half or 2 years of doing this, you know, going in, buying a distressed property, doing it up a little bit, getting some better tenants in it, increasing the rent or increasing somewhat the cash flow, maybe by $50, $60 a month. And I really saw that a good value in doing that. And I really didn't understand what I was doing. I just sort of was doing it. And it wasn't until I spoke to a friend of mine from Canada who had taken down some large apartments up there, unbeknownst to me, that he sort of explained a little bit more about the power of the cap rate and the enforcing the net operating income. And to cut a long story short, I went into needing to use other people's money to grow my business because I was really passionate about real estate investing and growing my long-term wealth. So that's where I went and developed a brand, and I developed RSM Property Group. And then that's where I went a step further, and I helped a couple of my partners and we were able to syndicate on a large deal in Texas last year, 250 units, which was really, really incredible. Had no idea I was going to do my first major multifamily deal. of that size. And now I'm really into the finding investors and connecting investors with our deals now, and really just continuing to grow my business here in the United States. I do have a bit of a flavor to try and get international investors to come to the United States because there is such good yield. But I do have a lot of American investors involved with what I'm doing here in the United States market, and particularly in Texas. We've got some deals in Philadelphia, again in upstate New York as well. But we're across a few different states. So that's sort of in a nutshell what I do and what I am. And I hope that answers your question, Rod.
Yeah, sure. Now let's first talk about the duplexes for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you paid cash for some duplexes in upstate New York. You were actually able to find some for $50,000 a piece, which is a phenomenal price. Was this a small town in New York, or where were you?
Yeah, I was investing in Syracuse, New York, and in Buffalo.
Okay.
And the reason for that was because I could, I was living in New York City. It's an expensive city, and I couldn't buy a duplex for $50,000, but I could drive 4.5-5 hours, and I could be at the site. So that's why I chose just somewhere close that was cheap to when I first, starting out in real estate.
Okay. So you self-managed those
No.
4.5 hours away, or you hired somebody?
No,
out there?
I definitely hired someone, and through my education, I know that hiring a property manager is key. It's just a line item in your expenses, and it's just something you have to you've got to take into consideration when you're doing the cash flow analysis.
Sure. Yeah, and you have to manage them, so
Exactly.
you have to be very careful in the selection process. So, okay, and then and you're in California now, correct?
That's correct. The whole reason and I failed to mention this, the whole reason I moved to the United States is I moved here for love for my girlfriend. She is American, so she's from LA, and so that's why we moved back here. Okay.
Well, I want to dissect play-by-play your Texas deal, the 250-unit deal.
Cool.
So, did you start your syndication process before you found the deal? I assume you did.
Yeah. So this is
let's talk about that.
Yeah,
then.
This is a very interesting story, and I'm sure it will help a lot of people on your show, Rod, because I came to LA in beginning of middle of 2014. I just started this business, this brand. I had my mentor, and I was like, look, I need to get my brand out there. I just need to network with other people. And I started a networking event, and the reason to start a networking event was to increase my reach.
Like you did a meetup group
exactly,
or something?
A meetup group, just a small. We met at a bar, and we did it once a month. And I think the third or fourth month, I met this guy named Frank, and he came to the event, and we got chatting, and all of a sudden, we're at coffee a week later, and he's like, "Look, mate, I'm looking to break out from my day job. I work as an asset manager, blah blah blah. I've got this deal I want to take down, but I have no capital investors." And I said, "Well, hey, I've got some capital investors who are looking to place their money. Would would you want to do something?" And we, from that meetup event, he was able to bring a deal to me because I was struggling with deal flow because, as you know, Rod, trying to find investors and trying to find deals at the same time can be very, very time consuming. And, you need the power of having a good team around you is that you might be able to have a partner who can just focus on the deal flow and you can focus on the investors, or vice versa. That's actually the ideal scenario.
Exactly. Some of the most successful people I know, that's how they do it. And one person's out there beating the bushes looking for money, and the other person's out there beating the bushes looking for deals.
Exactly.
So that's how this thing came together. This guy had a deal, and was this the Texas deal?
That's correct.
Or was
that was the Texas deal, and
that was the Texas deal.
I had no idea that it was. I was like 250 units. Wow. Okay. And then so I introduced my mentor to Frank, this gentleman, and I raised some capital. My mentor raised some capital. Frank raised a bit of capital, and we just sort of bootstrapped this thing together. And it was just, there was a lot of sleepless nights, and let me back up for a second. Sure.
So I want to really do this play by play, so the people listening can get an idea of how to put something like this together. Mm-hmm. So obviously you found an attorney that specializes in syndications to put your documents together.
Yes, we definitely had an attorney who came involved with the deal.
Okay.
Yeah, that was one.
And so they put together your LLCs, your offering memorandum. You did a. You did an executive summary of the property, I take it?
Yes. So to back it right up, Frank found the deal, came to me, we underwrote it, I introduced it to my mentor. We then went and we put an offer in. And now when we put the offer in, we were rejected. and we lost it to another group. But then they found out there was some fishy situation going on. Frank knew the broker. They fell out. The original, the first offer fell out of contract or for whatever reason, and we were the next ones in line. And the broker, due to relationships with Frank, had pushed us forward, and we were able to then get our offer accepted. That's when the sort of we hit the ground running in terms of having to raise money in a very short period of time, and had to.
Oh wow!
And had to do
how much due diligence? I mean, how much time did you have before the money went hard?
I think it was 60 days. So
that's quite a bit.
It's not too bad, but it was more the fact that trying to get everyone confident in the fact that what we were doing, given that it was our first major deal and of this size. So that's where we had to rely on a couple of our friends, mentors, family who had a little bit more pull to really, raise that capital. Then back to your original sort of the sequence of scenarios. So we got the offer accepted. We then went into due diligence. Coming to the end of due diligence, we then realized that we needed to go hard with our money. We then got the lawyers involved to start doing the syndication part of it in terms of the LLC and the PPM and all that good stuff that is involved with the investor subscription. Once that was in place, and that was sort of within the first week and a half, 2 weeks.
So a week and a half into your due diligence, you're like, hey, we better get our syndication put together and get rolling here.
Exactly.
Okay, and so you had an attorney do that. Tell me about your executive summary. Describe your executive summary that you present to potential investors.
Sure.
Tell my listeners what's in an executive summary.
Sure. So there's two things to when you start raising money, and the first is to get a conversation started. And to get a conversation started, you might just have a little investment prospectus, and that is just maybe a 6, 7, 8 page sort of summary of the deal. And that's something that we put together in a PowerPoint presentation. It had the size of the deal, it had the how much it was going to cost. We had a massive value add strategy because that was what our investment strategy was to improve the units, change the property management out, and also decrease the operation expenses. So we went through step by step, play by play.
And I want to actually dissect what you just said in more detail.
Sure.
But let's continue with the executive. So you start with that small executive summary.
Yep.
And then once the PPM documents are together, obviously there's a much more robust CYA type document, and could you describe that document as well?
Yeah, and I guess the order of sequence is that once you present the investment perspective to someone who might be interested because you've developed a relationship with them, and they said, "Oh, I'll take a look at it." And if they are interested and they want to talk a little bit more, you say, "Hey, we've got a PPM in place. Would you like to review that?" I send that over, and that PPM was done by the lawyers. It was, it was a large document, and that was where that it went through all the, the risks, the roles and responsibilities, all the sort of information, all the disclosing to all our investors what is happening with this deal, the investment.
Right, what could go wrong, who's involved, all the details.
But that comes at a sort of a later date. When you raise your capital, you don't just throw a PPM at someone because they're like, "Whoa, what's this?"
No, of course not. Of course not. They have to express interest.
Right. They've got to express interest, and that was where the investment prospectus is very, very important to whet the appetite of those potential investors, and then you follow up with.
So how much was the purchase price?
The purchase price $14.1 million.
Okay, and how much did you have to raise?
I think 3.5 million.
Okay, and can you tell me how many investors were involved to raise that level of money?
I think we ended up having somewhere in the order of 45 investors, all accredited investors, investing from as low as $50,000, because we just had to, again, being our first deal, a lot of friends and family were involved, we had to just get the deal over the line, and that was why there were so many investors involved. Sure. And for those of you that don't know what an accredited investor means, they have particular income and net worth requirements. Do you know what those are off the top of your head, Reed? Surely do. Know it very well. It's someone who has a minimum income of $200,000 a year or a net worth of $1 million, excluding the personal residence. That's right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. Super. So that's an accredited investor, guys, and the hoops that you have to jump through
to bring an accredited investor in are much lower than the hoops for non-accredited investors. And frankly, accredited investors are more sophisticated, easier to deal with. Now, do you manage your investor relations personally, Reed, or do you have? You do.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so you're the one updating them on the property. All right, well that's great. Now let's talk about that property. So you saw an opportunity. As a value add opportunity. So what did you recognize? First of all, where'd you find it? Was it just a LoopNet property, or was it an off-market deal?
And this is where Frank Kazas came into his own because of his existing relationships with the broker and his deal flow that he had, and that was what I was struggling with at the time. Yeah. So that I found it through.
So he brought the deal. Okay. Mm-hmm. And do you know how he found it? I mean, was it just through connections, or was
That's correct. Through his day job? He was an asset manager for another company. He got a lot of deal flow, and he just
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
All right, got it. So what did you recognize in this property? So let's start with income. What did you see that you could do with the income, and how could you improve it? And for those of you that are listening, when you're looking at one of these properties, you're interested in one major thing, and that is how can you raise your net operating income, because that directly equates to an increase in value. So you're looking at income and you're looking at expenses. So Reed, let's start with income.
Sure. So the property was built in 2000, so it was a relatively new property. However, nothing had been done in terms of it's still a very 1990s look. The current market, the current rents that they were getting for those 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms and single bedroom units was probably in the order of, I would say, between $80 to $100 below market rent. And we then understood the reason why, and that was because the property manager was out of state, and that was a major, it was a red flag, but it was a good flag to have it as being a red flag, because that meant that we could, change the property manager to a local guy who, does this day in, day out, which is a Class B asset with blue collar tenants. That was really like ooh la la sort of moment where we said, okay, we can really increase the value of the income of the rents because of those just mismanagement and the fact that the units need a little bit of updating. They need to be brought out of the 1990s and into something more modern.
Are you in the middle of doing that updating now?
Correct.
What sorts of things are you doing?
Yeah, so we're going to go in and we are going in, replacing the appliances from white appliances to black appliances, replacing the countertops, replacing the tiling in the bathroom and the vanities. And another big thing that adds a lot of value that people really, really like is just replacing the light fixtures, from a simple strip light to maybe a little bit more fancy $30-$40 light from Home Depot or something, which just adds a lot of value.
You're updating the bathrooms and the countertops. I just did some refinishing on tile in one of our units, where they go in and they paint the tile and they configure and they make the Formica countertops. They cut them down where they're edged and they look just like Corian when they're done, and they came out beautifully. It's something you may want to look into. It's much less than replacing tile. You just literally, it's a paint, but it's it comes with a 5 or 10 year warranty. I don't remember, but it's much less expensive than replacing. But anyway, that's just an aside. I don't want to go down that path, but just to mention. So all right, so you're improving the units. You're going to raise the rents. $80 to $100, and guys, just so you know, you don't go in and buy a place and just raise the rents, because you're going to piss everybody off and you're going to lose your tenants. And the whole name of the game is maintain your tenant base. So you give them something to make them happy. And this has come up before in other interviews. So that's what you're doing on the income. Now, you saw that there was out-of-state management, which makes no sense. And so you brought in, you're bringing in, or you brought in-state management. Did you see, specific instances of expenses being higher than they should be?
On that side, it wasn't too bad. It was really more the fact is that we could just tweak it a little bit here and there. I guess having a little bit more hands-on property management would give. It probably wasn't going to reduce the overall expenses a ton, but what we was going to do was give confidence to the current tenants that we knew what we were doing, and that there were more, because one of the big feedbacks we got from some of the tenants was that just they were absent, these property managers, and so it was difficult to get them on the phone and yada yada yada. But we definitely also implemented a daycare because it's 250 units, and that was huge value to these tenants that increased the income, but it also helped them want to stay longer, right? They want to sign another lease, and we're getting longer term tenants because of this daycare system that we put in, or after school care in one of the units, and it added a lot of value to their lives, and that was something that that's our motto. We want to be able to provide affordable, clean, living for these people that want to, they're not going to go out and pay top dollar for the latest apartment community that's just been built, in Houston, Texas.
Sure.
So
sure.
Yeah.
Another thing that Scott Scheel, one of my interviews that we just posted, fantastic interview did with his apartment complex, was he went in when he made these changes, he gave them options, and if they wanted something additional done, he put them in a 2-year lease. If they wanted the ultimate done, they got a 3-year lease. They signed a 3-year lease. So he kind of negotiated longer term leases based on the amount of work that was done in the units, which I thought was an interesting thing to do, and really very clever. But anyway,
and just to add to that, we found a lot of value that some people. And this is maybe for some guys listening out there. Don't just, if you've got some vacancies in your property, don't fill them with other new tenants. Go and offer those rehabbed units to the existing tenants that might have been there for a year or 18 months, because they may want that. And what that does is free up another unit for you to go and rehab.
That's a great idea.
So
that's a great idea.
Just a little tidbit or advice.
Sure. So You're in the midst of doing the turnaround on that property. What do your projections tell you? You said you paid, what did you say? Was it $14 million or $11 million? I don't remember here.
14.1.
14.1. What do your projections show your value will be once you're reposition? Yeah.
Yeah. So we're putting in about $750,000 worth of repositioning, both interior and exterior, to the property over a period of 18 months. Over the projections, it's going to be an 18-month period. By the time it stabilizes again, at the end of year 2, we're looking to having a projected value of the property in the order of about $17.5 million. So,
and what kind of return did you tell your investors? That you were shooting for?
Sure. So we have
cash on cash.
We have a cash on cash return of over 10%. We're projecting to hit an over cash on cash return of over 10% this year. We have a pref return of 8%. So for those people out there who don't know what a pref is, it just means that sort of the first 8% of profit goes.
It means preferential. Just for that's an acronym for preferential. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine. It's good. It just means the first 8% of income profit, I should say, from the cash flow goes straight to the investors, and then we will take a 2% asset management fee, and the rest is then split based on the equity in the deal. So whether that be 70-30 or whatever you've structured the deal to be. And so, the investors are currently projecting to get over 10% return, cash on cash return this year.
Do you take a what's the fee I'm thinking of? Like a deal structure fee, something up front at closing?
Yeah, we do. We do take a deal structure fee, a syndication fee.
A syndication fee. How much is that?
It's about 2%, and that's it's from pulling.
That's actually low. I've heard as high as 5%.
Wow.
So that's reasonable.
Yeah.
So, okay. So. Well, that sounds like a phenomenal deal. I know that you've got another one in the pipeline you mentioned, and so you're rolling here. You said you had 350 unit property you're looking at that looks like it's close to closing. Mm-hmm. Let's talk some basics for people that are listening. What suggestions do you have for someone starting out that wants to syndicate? And take down a larger property. What would you tell them?
I love this question, Rod. I sort of someone asked me this the other day, and I've just been rolling around in my head, and I don't want to be too cheesy, but I like to call it the 4 Ps. And the first one is professionalism. And professionalism means that no one is born with 10 years worth of credibility. Everyone who gets involved in real estate, or syndication, or investing, or whatever you're doing, flipping houses, wholesaling, you need to build that professionalism. And professionalism can come from other industries that you've been involved in. So you're going to need to get a website. You're going to need to get a good headshot on your LinkedIn profile. Just being professional and the way you present yourself to other investors, that's very, very key. The second one is pitch. You need to have a good pitch to investors, to anyone you're speaking to about what you're trying to do. And that's very, very key. A 2-minute elevator pitch I like to practice on a daily basis or a weekly basis. The third P, I should say, is practice. And you've got to practice. You've got to get in front of investors. You've got to get in front of people and network really, really hard, because that's how you're going to increase your reach. The bigger your reach is, the more deals you get done. And the fourth P is patience. It's going to take a lot of time. And that's the one thing that I've struggled to learn over the last 3-4 years is
that's my toughest one too. That's my worst quality, impatience.
Is patience. I want to get it done yesterday, but you just take a breath. It's going to happen, and you're moving forward, and just take a chill pill.
No, that's great advice. I wanted to get back to something that I forgot to ask you about.
Sure.
What sort of financing did you get on that deal?
Yeah,
did you get recourse or non-recourse, or what did you get?
We got non-recourse bridge loan, interest only for 2 years, and then third year is principal and interest, and then it goes for 2 1-year extensions after that. But the idea is to, once we've repositioned after year 2, is to refinance into a longer-term loan. But
you got non-recourse bridge money. Correct. Wow, that's fantastic. So those of you that don't know what that means he's not on the hook if this deal goes south.
Yes, exactly.
So that's a very safe place to be.
And one thing I forgot to mention about that deal, which was very key to this whole thing coming together, and it went down to one of my partner's brilliance. He actually cold called a couple of the other larger properties in the area, hit it off with one of the local guys who ended up coming as one of the co-sponsors on the loan.
I was just going to ask you about sponsorship.
Yeah.
So, guys, for those of you that don't know what that means, if you're going to do a big deal like this, they're going to want someone on board that has done it or knows how to do it, and they're typically called a sponsor, and you're going to have to give them a small piece usually. And if they sign on the debt, they sign what's called a bad boy clause, and that means if there cannot be any fraud in the deal. I mean, they're not on the hook for the loan as long as there's nothing fraudulent going on, but they're gonna sign. They won't be personally responsible for the debt unless, again, something shady is going on. But sponsors are not that hard to get. You want someone that's done it before, and so that was real smart. Find somebody right there nearby that owns a unit and say, hey, I'll give you X% to help sponsor this deal. And that's what he did, right? That's
what he did. And the caveat to that, or the key to this, was that he had a property management arm of his business. And so, which was already running over 1,000 properties in that sort of niche of 200 units, blue collar, in Houston. It was just everything went together.
So which gives the bank incredible comfort. When they okay, I've already got 1,000 units in the area. I'm getting involved in this deal, and that's what you need when you get started, guys. And at some point you can be a sponsor, but to get started, you're going to need a sponsor in this size, in this caliber of property.
Right.
So that's a very good tip.
Just sorry to cut you off there, Rod. With one other thing was, it was also very good to show to our investors, particularly being our first major deal. It's like, we've got a sponsor on the loan.
Absolutely.
But he's also
instant credibility.
But he's also the property manager, so he's got skin in the game, and he's now incentivized to make sure the property runs effectively. And that was key. That was like great business.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And that's you guys should be looking for someone like that right out of the gate, because to have someone like that on your website as participating in whatever it is you're doing. We did it. I did it with mobile home parks. Found a guy that had 3,000 units in mobile home parks. Another guy that had owned 30,000 units, and they were on my website. And they are acting as sponsors, and instant credibility. You've got incredible seasoned, experienced people on your team. Mm-hmm. Now, you know what? I was going to ask you about your mentor, but before that, I want to ask you about your team. Tell me what kind of team you put together to get this done.
Yeah, so there's my Frank, one of my partners. Right. There's also my mentor, who was very, very influential in this whole first deal.
Tell me about him. Yeah. How'd you find him? Who is he? Yeah.
So I don't want to plug. You're not a plugging type of guy. Am I allowed to mention names? Is that okay?
Well, if you want to mention
Sure.
names, you can. I'm not going to stop you.
Okay. His name's Joe Fairless. He has another great podcast.
Joe. Okay, sure.
I met Joe back in early 2014 when he was just starting out as a mentor, and he was really just, I liked him because he was actively doing deals, and that was the biggest thing. And bringing him involved in this deal and introducing him to Frank, my partner now, was really influential, and he was able to open up a bunch of, going back talking about that credibility, a bunch of financial streams and open a bunch of doors which was very, very key. But I also helped, Joe through that relationship. I helped Joe. He created a bunch of wealth as well and a bunch of credibility, because if I bought him a bad deal, it wouldn't look good on me, right? So it was a cracking deal, and it was a win-win for everyone. So
yeah, and those of you listening, you really highly recommend mentors. You need people like that, and they can be invaluable. They could be the ones that are adding credibility to your program, to your business model. They could be the ones that are sponsoring, or they could be just whispering in your ear. Mm-hmm. But you definitely need mentors. So, well, what suggestions would you have for someone just getting started? Let's go back to when you first got started. Somebody hasn't taken down a deal yet. They're on the fence, or they're just starting to learn about it. What would you tell them?
I would tell them that, and I don't want to push my own background, but I think pushing yourself in the way that, like, I started that networking event. I was very, very nervous when I first started it, but without starting that networking event, I wouldn't have done that first deal. I wouldn't have met Frank. I wouldn't have been able to connect everyone that I connected. And it sort of goes back to that, because doing something a little bit different and putting yourself out there and taking a risk. And that's not a very hard risk to take just by saying to someone or saying to a group of people, let's meet at a bar and talk about real estate investing. That's all I had to do. Now, you might not be an outgoing person, so maybe get to other people's networking events and just, say to yourself, I need to get to 3 networking events a month, and I'm going to meet X amount of people. And after 6 months, I reckon you're going to meet so many people that are going to open doors for you that will just be so invaluable. And I can't tell your listeners how important it is to network, because that's the way these things get done, and I'm a living example of that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I go to lots of workshops and seminars and boot camps, and even real estate ones, and the real deals and the real connections that you make out in the hallway are much more valuable than the content you're getting inside the room. So you're absolutely right. Besides these relationships and the mentors and some of the other things we've talked about, what, from an educational standpoint, what would you suggest to someone? Are there any books that you like about real estate, or things that someone could go out and learn that you're aware of? Yeah,
again, networking is one thing, but also education and increasing your financial IQ. The whole cookie penny drop, whatever you want to call it, for me was reading Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki back in 2009. It was just like, this is what I needed to do. Listening to your podcast, Rod, is hugely beneficial to people out there. Listening to other people who are out there doing it and taking little tidbits from them and combining all that information you learn into how you're going to process it and then go forward and do that first deal. Huge fan of getting to your local RIA or your local investing club to go to their boot camps or whatever it might be and learn. Just absorb everything you can. In terms of books, I'm reading a couple of different books right now. The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss is not to do with real estate investing, but it's sort of putting me in that mindset. I love the book when I first came to the United States, which was very key, and a thing that I would have paid top dollar for to a guru in Australia, 15, 20 grand, was readily available in a book, and it was called Flip. It was a book that was, it's about flipping houses, but it still went through step by step of how you analyze a local market, how you market for your deals, and you can take those little tidbits out to apply to your multifamily deals. It's all the same sort of stuff. You're marketing to a distressed seller. You're marketing to someone who wants to get the deal off their hands or something like that, and that's very, very key. Taking that bit of information away and going out and doing it.
Right.
So yeah.
Great. Well, I I have done some, I think, very powerful 5 to 10 minute weekly episodes that are in the past. They're in my history, but they were titled Your Driving Force Success Tip,
sure.
where we talk about goal setting, visualization, motivation. As you know, 80% of success in anything is your psychology, and 20% is the actual knowledge. I always like to ask, where do you get your drive? What makes you jump out of bed in the morning to conquer the day?
Yeah, my drive is, I'm just one of those people that, as I mentioned earlier, that patience part of me isn't the best, and I've got to learn a bit better. But I've always been that person to get out there and go get it. And, success is the only option for me. I don't know why that is. It's just the way I was brought up in my family in Australia. In terms of getting the mindset right, I completely 100% agree with you, Rod, and I will start tuning into those shows because I'm right now. I'm also in a I don't want to say a journey, but it's sort of in a position where I'm really focusing on my meditation, really focusing on getting that mindset, because I've just realized in the last 12 months how important that is to getting anything done, whatever business you might be in. It doesn't have to be real estate, but that's just so vital to getting the top, keeping it clean between the ears, I like to say, and that is really, really important. And it goes back from education to learning from other people to meditating to just getting out and taking your mind off real estate development or investing for.
And I'll add one more thing, and that is giving back.
Yes, giving
back is also critical.
Yes.
Well, we're getting near the end of the show, and I was hoping you could leave the listeners with one last golden nugget, for either someone that's in the business, wants to take it bigger, or someone that's not in the business yet. What would you tell that person?
For someone who wants to scale their business, never give up.
Winston Churchill, baby.
Yeah.
I've got that on my desk. It's right there on a metal thing on my desk. Never, ever, ever, ever give up.
I don't care if you're going at 100 miles an hour towards your goals or you're going 1 mile an hour towards your goals. As long as you're progressing, that is really, really important. And don't give up. There's going to be ups and downs. We've all had them. We're all going through them, or whatever it might be. Just keep positive and keep moving forward.
Well, this has been an awesome show, buddy. You've added incredible value. I really appreciate your time, and I hope that we can stay in contact and watch each other's successes.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Rod.
All right, buddy. Take care. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you for listening to the Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please subscribe, and then take a moment to visit iTunes and leave a 5-star rating and review. For more resources to connect with us further, please visit our website at lifetimecashflowpodcast.com. Tune in next week for our next show.